Ladies and gentlemen, in a world that constantly demands our attention, our energy, and our time, there is one invisible shield that can preserve our peace, our dignity, and our self-worth. That shield is boundaries. Boundaries are not walls meant to isolate us. They are doors and fences with gates that allow us to choose what enters and what leaves our lives. Without them, we become vulnerable to manipulation, burnout, and exploitation. With them, we cultivate respect, balance, and freedom. So let's ask ourselves, why are boundaries our greatest protection? The answer is simple, because they define where you end and the world begins. They are your personal declaration that says, "This is who I am, this is what I stand for, and this is what I will and will not allow." Too often, we live without boundaries, afraid of rejection, desperate to please, or conditioned to put everyone else before ourselves. And what happens? People cross lines, they drain our energy, they take without giving, and slowly we lose sight of who we are. But when you establish boundaries, you protect your identity, your emotional health, and your future. Think about it. Would you leave your home with the doors wide open for anyone to walk in? Of course not. You lock it, not because you hate people, but because you love what's inside. Boundaries work the same way. You are the home, your mind, your heart, your dreams. They are treasures, and treasures must be guarded. Now, how do we use boundaries effectively? First, we must know our limits. What drains you? What disrespects you? What compromises your values? Boundaries begin with self-awareness. Second, we must communicate them clearly. Boundaries are useless if left unspoken. A firm but respectful "no, I can't take this on right now" is not rudeness. It's self-respect in action. Third, we must enforce them consistently. People will test your limits. They will push back. But every time you hold your ground, you teach them how to treat you. And you teach yourself that you are worthy of protection. Finally, we must release guilt. Setting boundaries will upset some people, especially those who benefited from you having none. That discomfort is not your burden. You are not responsible for others' reactions. You are responsible for your own well-being. Boundaries are not selfish. Boundaries are sacred. They allow you to give from a place of strength instead of depletion. They allow you to love without resentment. They allow you to shine without being dimmed by others' demands. So today, I urge you, guard your peace like a priceless diamond. Draw your lines, speak your truth, protect your energy, because when you honor your boundaries, you honor yourself. And when you honor yourself, you unlock the ability to live fully, freely, and fearlessly. Remember this, your boundaries are not barriers to connection. They are bridges to healthier relationships. They are not punishments. They are protections, and they are not selfish. They are survival. Ladies and gentlemen, your greatest shield against the chaos of the world is not your strength, not your wealth, not even your intelligence. It is your boundaries. Use them wisely, and you will protect the life you deserve. Boundaries define who you are and what you stand for. Boundaries are not just limits. They are living declarations of who you are. They define your values, your identity, and your capacity to thrive in a world that constantly demands more of you. Without them, your sense of self blurs. You bend to every expectation, you give in to every demand, and eventually you lose sight of what matters most to you. But when you set boundaries, you draw a clear line that says, "This is me. This is what I will allow, and this is what I won't." Imagine your life as a piece of land. Without fences or markers, anyone can step in, plant their own seeds, or even take over parts of it. Soon, you would find yourself living on soil that no longer feels like yours. Boundaries are those markers. They don't lock you in. They simply establish ownership. They tell the world, "This space is mine, and it must be respected." In the same way, boundaries are not about shutting others out. They are about ensuring that your identity is preserved in every interaction. At their core, boundaries are reflections of your values. If honesty is important to you, you will not tolerate lies. If respect is important to you, you will not accept being spoken to in ways that demean you. If rest is vital to you, you will not allow endless demands to rob you of sleep or peace. Each boundary is a statement. I honor myself enough to protect what matters most. Many people fear that boundaries make them appear selfish or distant. But the truth is the opposite. Boundaries are not about creating distance, they are about creating clarity. When others know where you stand, they know how to engage with you. You become predictable in the best way, not easily swayed by manipulation, but steady, grounded, and authentic. People may not always like your boundaries, but they will respect them because boundaries reveal a person of integrity. Defining yourself through boundaries also means recognizing your limits. None of us has infinite energy, time, or emotional capacity. If we try to live without boundaries, we say yes to everything, and in doing so, we end up saying no to ourselves. Think about the times you overcommitted, stayed silent when you wanted to speak, or tolerated disrespect because you didn't want conflict. Each time you lost a piece of yourself. Boundaries are the way back. They remind you that your well-being is not negotiable. When you declare your boundaries, you send a message to the world. I respect myself enough to be seen and treated rightly. And that message has power. It attracts people who honor your standards and filters out those who would trample on them. In other words, your boundaries act as both protection and magnetism. They protect you from harm while drawing in the right kind of relationships, opportunities, and experiences. So, why do boundaries define who you are? Because they are the outward expression of your inner truth. They are not random rules, they are extensions of your deepest values, your hard-earned lessons, and your unwavering self-worth. They are the frame that holds the painting of your life, ensuring it is not smudged, stolen, or devalued by others. And here's the greatest gift. When you stand firm in your boundaries, you empower others to do the same. You show them that it is not only acceptable, but necessary to protect their peace. In this way, your boundaries don't just define who you are. They inspire others to rise and define themselves too. Boundaries are your voice when silence would betray you. They are your armor when life becomes too demanding. And most importantly, they are your identity in action, visible proof that you know who you are and you refuse to let the world decide for you. Lack of boundaries leads to exploitation and burnout. When we fail to establish boundaries, we unknowingly open the door to exploitation, disappointment, and exhaustion. A life without boundaries is like leaving your home unlocked. You may trust people to behave with kindness, but sooner or later, someone will take advantage of that open door. Without limits, we become easy targets for those who drain, demand, and disrespect. And the tragic outcome, burnout, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Let's first understand why lack of boundaries leads to exploitation. Human beings, by nature, respond to what is allowed. If you always say yes, people assume you are always available. If you never object when disrespected, people conclude that disrespect is acceptable. In other words, silence becomes permission. By not drawing the line, you unintentionally teach others how to treat you. And sadly, not everyone treats you with kindness. Consider the workplace. If you consistently stay late because you don't want to upset your boss, soon staying late becomes the expectation, not the exception. If you keep taking on extra tasks to avoid conflict, you'll quickly find yourself carrying responsibilities that aren't yours. This isn't just unfair, it's exploitation, and it happens not because you're weak, but because you didn't build the fence that says, "This is where my responsibility ends." The same truth applies in personal relationships. Without boundaries, friends may overstep. Family members may control, and partners may take without giving. When you never voice your limits, you end up sacrificing your needs to maintain harmony. But the harmony is false. It comes at the cost of your well-being. Over time, resentment builds, trust erodes, and the relationship suffers. Now let's talk about the burnout that follows. Burnout is not simply being tired. It's a deep state of depletion where your mind, body, and soul feel empty. It's waking up exhausted, feeling resentful, and losing the joy you once had in life. And here's the hard truth. Burnout is often self-inflicted through the absence of boundaries. By saying yes to everything, you say no to rest. By allowing constant disrespect, you say no to your own dignity, and by ignoring your limits, you eventually hit a wall that forces you to stop. Burnout doesn't happen overnight. It builds slowly, one unspoken no at a time. One overextended commitment at a time, one ignored need at a time, and before you realize it, you're not just tired, you're disconnected from yourself. You've given so much that you have nothing left to give, not even to yourself. But here's the good news. Burnout is preventable. The cure begins with boundaries. When you learn to say no, you conserve your energy for what matters most. When you stand firm against disrespect, you preserve your dignity. When you guard your time and emotional space, you protect your peace. It's important to understand that setting boundaries isn't about keeping everyone away, it's about keeping yourself intact. Healthy boundaries allow you to give, but not at the cost of your soul. They allow you to love others, but without losing yourself in the process. They allow you to succeed, but not at the price of exhaustion. So, when you feel drained, resentful, or invisible, pause and ask yourself, where have I failed to set a boundary? Where have I allowed too much access to my time, my heart, or my energy? The answer will reveal the cracks that need to be sealed. Ultimately, the absence of boundaries is not a sign of generosity. It's a recipe for exploitation and collapse. True generosity comes from a place of fullness, not depletion. And fullness is only possible when you protect yourself with clear, firm, and consistent boundaries. If you want to avoid being used, if you want to live free of resentment, if you want to thrive instead of merely survive, then remember this. Boundaries are not optional. They are essential. Without them, burnout is inevitable. With them, balance is achievable. Boundaries must be communicated clearly and enforced consistently. A boundary that is never spoken is not a boundary. It's a silent hope, and hopes, unspoken, are often overlooked. Boundaries only protect us when they are clear, communicated, and enforced. Otherwise, they exist only in our minds, leaving others unaware of where the line is, and us feeling frustrated when it is crossed. The first step is clarity. If you don't know your own limits, no one else can respect them. You must be crystal clear about what drains you, what disrespects you, and what matters most to you. Ask yourself, what am I no longer willing to tolerate? What do I need to feel safe, respected, and valued? The answers form the foundation of your boundaries, but clarity alone is not enough. You must communicate. Boundaries cannot stay locked inside your head. They must be expressed directly and respectfully. For example, saying, I won't be able to respond to work emails after 7 p.m. is much more effective than silently resenting every late night message that arrives. Saying, please don't raise your voice at me, I will only continue this conversation when we are calm, sets a clear expectation for respect. Here's the truth, people are not mind readers. Many times, they cross our unspoken limits not out of malice, but out of ignorance. And when we fail to communicate, resentment grows. Clear communication removes confusion. It tells people exactly where we stand and what behavior is acceptable. Yet, even communication isn't enough if we don't follow through. This brings us to the most challenging part, enforcement. Enforcing boundaries means holding firm when they are tested, and they will be tested. Some people will push against your limits to see if you really mean them. Others will resist because they were comfortable with your lack of boundaries. This is where consistency becomes essential. If you say, I won't lend money anymore, but then give in the next time someone pressures you, your words lose power. If you say, I need an hour of quiet after work, but then allow interruptions without consequence, people will continue to disregard your needs. Enforcing boundaries requires courage. It means being willing to walk away from situations, or even relationships, that repeatedly disrespect your limits. Consistency also communicates something powerful, self-respect. When you enforce your boundaries without wavering, you send a message that your well-being is non-negotiable, And when others see that you mean what you say, they learn to treat you with greater respect. Of course, enforcing boundaries does not mean aggression. It doesn't mean yelling, punishing, or cutting people off impulsively. True enforcement is calm, firm, and steady. It is saying, "This is my line, and I will not move it," and then standing by it with quiet strength. It's also important to remember that enforcing boundaries isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself. You cannot force people to change, but you can decide how you will respond. If someone disrespects your boundary, your enforcement may be stepping back, limiting access, or even ending contact if necessary. The power is always in your response. And finally, consistency matters most because it builds trust, not only with others, but with yourself. Every time you hold firm, you prove to yourself that you can be trusted to protect your own well-being. You strengthen your sense of self-worth. You show yourself that your needs matter. So let this truth sink in. Boundaries only work when they are spoken and upheld. A boundary not communicated is a secret. A boundary not enforced is an illusion. But a boundary clearly expressed and consistently enforced becomes a shield. Strong, steady, and protective. When you master this skill, you no longer live in resentment. You no longer feel invisible. You step into relationships with clarity, confidence, and respect. And that is the power of boundaries communicated and enforced. Boundaries are acts of self-respect, not selfishness. One of the greatest lies we've been told is that setting boundaries is selfish. From a young age, many of us are conditioned to believe that good people always say yes, always accommodate, and always put others first. But here's the truth. Constantly sacrificing your well-being for the comfort of others is not kindness. It's self-abandonment. Boundaries are not selfish. They are acts of self-respect. Self-respect begins with recognizing your own worth. When you set a boundary, you are saying, "I value myself enough to protect my time, energy, and heart." Far from being selfish, this is one of the most generous things you can do. Why? Because when you respect yourself, you show up healthier, stronger, and more authentic in your relationships. Think of it this way: you cannot pour from an empty cup. If you keep giving without limits, eventually you run dry, leaving nothing for yourself and very little for others. Boundaries refill your cup. They ensure that when you do give, you give with joy, not resentment. They transform your yes into a gift instead of a burden. The fear of being called selfish often keeps people from setting boundaries. We worry about disappointing others or being labeled difficult. But let's ask honestly, is it selfish to say no to constant overwork so that you can protect your health? Is it selfish to ask for respect in your relationships? Is it selfish to rest when your body is exhausted? No. These are not acts of selfishness. They are acts of survival and strength. In fact, boundaries are a form of honesty. When you set them, you are transparent about what you can and cannot give. Without them, you may say yes when you mean no or hide your exhaustion behind a smile. That is not kindness. It's dishonesty rooted in fear. True kindness comes from a place of authenticity, and authenticity requires boundaries. Moreover, boundaries benefit not only you but the people around you. When you set limits, you teach others how to interact with you respectfully. You prevent resentment from building in your relationships. You model healthy behavior for your children, friends, and colleagues. Imagine the ripple effect. One person boldly practicing self-respect inspires others to do the same. That is not selfish. That is leadership. It is also worth noting that those who call you selfish for setting boundaries are often the ones who benefited most from you having none. When you start saying no, when you stop overextending, when you reclaim your time, some people will resist. They may guilt you, criticize you, or try to push past your limits, but their reaction reveals more about their entitlement than about your character. Protecting your well-being is never wrong. Respecting yourself through boundaries also deepens your capacity for love. Without boundaries, love becomes blurred with fear, obligation, or dependency. With boundaries, love becomes a choice, a free, intentional offering rather than a forced duty. You can love more deeply because you are not loving at the expense of yourself. Think of boundaries as the oxygen mask on an airplane. They always tell you, put on your own mask first before helping others. Why? Because if you lose your oxygen, you cannot help anyone else. Boundaries are your oxygen mask in life. They ensure you stay strong enough to serve, love, and give in meaningful ways. So let us erase the guilt. Boundaries do not make you selfish. They make you healthy. They make you whole. They make you someone who can contribute without breaking, love without losing yourself, and live without regret. At their core, boundaries are not about keeping people out. They are about keeping yourself intact. And when you honor yourself, you create space for the best version of you to show up in every area of your life. That is not selfishness, that is self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of a life well lived. Healthy boundaries strengthen, not weaken, relationships. Many people fear that setting boundaries will push others away, create distance, or damage relationships. But the truth is the opposite. Healthy boundaries are the very thing that make relationships stronger, deeper, and more sustainable. They are not walls that isolate you. They are bridges that connect you in healthier, more respectful ways. Think of any strong structure, a bridge, a building, even a human body. What makes it strong? Balance, stability, and clear limits. Without those, everything collapses. Relationships work the same way. When there are no boundaries, relationships become imbalanced. One person gives too much while the other takes too much. Resentment grows, trust weakens, and eventually the connection crumbles. But when boundaries are present, relationships become fair, respectful, and resilient. One of the greatest gifts boundaries bring to relationships is clarity. When you clearly express what you need and expect, others no longer have to guess. Misunderstandings decrease and communication becomes more honest. For example, telling a partner, "I need some quiet time after work to recharge before we talk about our day," creates understanding rather than tension. Without that boundary, your silence might be misinterpreted as disinterest or coldness. Boundaries replace confusion with clarity. Boundaries also build mutual respect. When you state your limits, you are saying, "I respect myself enough to protect my needs." And when you respect yourself, others learn to respect you too. In turn, you learn to respect their boundaries, creating an atmosphere of equality. Relationships without respect cannot survive. Boundaries ensure respect is woven into every interaction. Another powerful truth is that boundaries protect relationships from resentment. Without them, you may say yes when you want to say no. Give more than you can afford, or tolerate behavior that hurts you. Over time, this breeds bitterness. You begin to feel used, unseen, or undervalued, and resentment is poison. It destroys love, friendship, and trust. Boundaries act as a shield, stopping resentment before it begins by ensuring you never give more than you are truly willing to give. Healthy boundaries also encourage authentic connection. When you know you can say no without being punished, your yes becomes real. When you know you can express your limits, you feel safe to show your true self. That safety allows love, trust, and intimacy to flourish. Boundaries create space for honesty, and honesty is the soil in which genuine relationships grow. Let's not forget that boundaries create balance. In a healthy relationship, giving and receiving should flow both ways. Boundaries keep that balance in check. If one person starts to dominate, demand, or take advantage, the other's boundaries restore fairness. Without them, relationships tilt into dependency, control, or exploitation. With them, relationships remain partnership, equal, respectful, and nourishing. It's also important to realize that healthy boundaries filter relationships. They reveal who belongs in your life and who doesn't. When you enforce your boundaries, some people may walk away, but those who remain, those who respect your limits, are the people who truly value you. Boundaries may cost you shallow connections, but they secure deeper, truer ones. Think of boundaries as the guardrails on a road. They don't block you from moving forward, they keep you from crashing. In the same way, boundaries don't block love, friendship, or connection. They protect them. They ensure that your relationships are safe places where both people can thrive, not suffocating spaces where one person loses themselves. So, let's change how we see boundaries in relationships. They are not threats. They are not punishments. They are not barriers. They are invitations to respect, to honesty, to balance, and to authentic love. If you want strong, lasting, meaningful relationships, you must be brave enough to set boundaries, because boundaries are not the end of connection. They are the beginning of true connection, and the people who truly care for you will never be offended by your limits. In fact, they will thank you for them. Ladies and gentlemen, we began with a simple truth. Boundaries are not barriers. They are protection. They define who you are, they shield you from exploitation, they preserve your energy, and they strengthen your relationships. Each keynote we explored leads us to one undeniable conclusion. Without boundaries, we lose ourselves. But with boundaries, we reclaim our power. Boundaries are not selfish. They are self-respect in action. They are not punishments to others. They are safeguards for our peace. And far from weakening relationships, they build the trust, respect, and balance that every healthy connection requires. Yes, boundaries may cause discomfort. Some people will resist them. Some may even leave when you enforce them. But let me remind you, anyone who cannot honor your boundaries does not deserve the deepest parts of your life. The ones who truly value you will respect your limits because they respect you. So as you leave here today, remember this. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They are about keeping yourself whole. They are the lines that allow you to live without resentment, to give without depletion, and to love without losing yourself. Protect your time, guard your energy, speak your truth, enforce your limits, not because you owe the world less, but because you owe yourself more. And when you do, you will find that your boundaries are not just your greatest protection. They are the very foundation of a life filled with dignity, freedom, and peace. Thank you.